JSF. So let us continue with the in-depth information about this particular framework. So the JSF, as discussed in the last class, JSF is nothing but it's a specification. So it's a specification that was there with the Java, or JSF is a part of Java, and the specification itself cannot be directly used for building any application. So what we have is a reference implementation. It's a specification as well as the implementation of those specifications. And these specifications are meant for building web applications. Now what you get in the JSF, if you take any reference implementation for that matter, what you get is you get a number of components. So like buttons, the checkboxes, and the different graphs and so on. So different types of charts, tables, and so on. So you get a lot of components. The specification is there as to how to build these components. What are the things that the component must have? In other words, the specification says how to standardize these components. Apart from them, the specification also deals with how to handle the event. In the last class, when I showed you a demo wherein the user was dragging a full column and was placing, or they were interchanging the columns, or if you click on a particular text box or a particular button, an event is generated. How to handle these events, and the specification even deals with that. The next one is the validators. So you are already familiar from your knowledge of struts. The use of the validator is to validate what information or what the user is typing. So we may want to check whether the values are in between a given range, or we may want to check whether the telephone number is in the proper format or the date is in proper format. For that we require validator. And the next part of it is integrating with the model. As usual, model is your whatever model that you want to use it's up to you. So whenever we talk about any framework for that matter, usually people don't venture into the business logic. So when we say that backend data, it means to say that how does this framework interact with your business logic. Apart from that, the specification was designed in such a way that the IDEs like NetBeans or Eclipse or JDeveloper or the RAD, that is Rational Application Developer, this is from IBM. We are going to write a test on that particular thing, that is a certification on the RAD, and you will come to know what is the advantage of using RAD. Okay, RAD is again built on top of Eclipse. All of them have this drag and drop functionalities. NetBeans had this drag and drop functionality for JSF in the version 5.5 and 6. After 6.1, I think 6.1 or 2, they have just dropped that particular plugin from the NetBeans, and it is no longer available with the NetBeans. When the specification was started, that is way back in the year 2005 or 2004 end, during that time when the NetBeans was released, NetBeans came with the drag and drop functionality. Now it is not there, or maybe the team is not there, or maybe something has happened with that thing. Okay. So let's look at what you get with the NetBeans. So with the JSF. When we talk about this JSF, JSF has a lot of APIs, application programming interface. These APIs are meant for creating the user component. So what is the reason? Why do we have to have a API for building a component? For example, you are building a button. So let's say you want to build a button of your own. Maybe you want to build a rounded button, or maybe a button of a fancy type of button. Now this is your component. you take a pen and you build it. Now when somebody clicks on this particular button, a click event is generated. Now this click event has to be handled by some other component. Now, if there is no standardization, what you will do is when somebody clicks on it, you will generate a object, or you will generate a action, or you will generate a event. Now, if there is no standardization, what will happen is your component may generate an event, but the other component may not be in any position to handle that particular event. So, when your component generates an event, the other component must be able to handle that particular event. Or if some other component is generating an event, your component must be able to handle it. That means there must be a kind of coordination between your component and the component that is created by maybe other company, or maybe your friends or somebody else. So how do we have this kind of standardization? The way in which we do it is, you are already familiar. We go for a interface. We say that everybody in your swings, you have already seen, you have to implement a interface, a listener interface. What is there in that listener interface is some standard functions are there. So you know very well, anybody who creates a button, they will somehow override this on-click event, and that on-click event takes some parameter, a fixed number of parameter, and it returns something. So this part is standardized by the Sun microsystem. So you know very well that any button or anything for that matter, if it implements on-click listener, and those methods will be available. So the two persons, the person who is building a new component and the people who have already built those components, all of them are in coordination with each other. Everybody knows that the other person has to implement this on-click listener, and some methods will be available. So when a event is fired from your button, if the other component wants to interact with it, they have to somehow call a method, on-click event or some kind of method which is standardized. That's the reason we have a set of API. So this set of API will give an indication as to how to use or how to coordinate between the other component. The next part what you have in your JSF is that API says how to manage the state. Okay, I'm not getting that mouse at that location. The next part is how do you manage the state? What's the meaning of saying the state? The state of your component is decided by the values of the properties. You may have many properties in it. For example, the state of your text box is decided by what is typed inside that text box. Do you have anything that is typed in it, or nothing is typed in it, or it is exceeding the limit that is given to the text box, or maybe the color in which it is being shown to the user. That is all. Or you may have some format in which the text has to be written. For example, if it is a date, there is a format. So that is decided, or that values will decide the state. How do you manage this state? Again, there is a standard way of managing the state, because once the user clicks on submit button, the entire value is sent back to the server, and the server uses it and then returns something back to the user. So if you want to maintain the state, that state has to be maintained by the framework, and if there is no standardization, naturally there will be some sort of confusion at the server. The next one is how to handle the input. So how do we handle the events that is provided by the user? How do we handle the input validation? How to go from one page to the other? So these APIs or this specification will tell you how to navigate from one page to the other. For example, in your struts, you have this mapping in the struts config. Similarly, we also have the facelet config that will tell us, or that will give an indication as to how to navigate between the pages. Apart from that, there are set of tag libraries which can be used to uh, add this component into your page. So you have seen that the JSF can be used to create many components. Now these components are Java codes. You don't directly include the Java into your JSP or your HTML pages. You need some tags which can easily do that thing, and the specification includes that. The next one is support for different types of rendering. Now, when we talk about JSF, JSF is not tied only to HTML. You can render the page in different formats. You can use the WML for your mobile applications. So you can render the buttons, the text box in a different way for a mobile device, and that is possible by using different rendering renderers. Now let's look at the history. I won't go in depth into it. First version was 1.0 that was released in the year 2004. It was chaired by our Craig McClanahan, and he is the person behind these Struts. The same person who started Struts was the chairperson for the JSF. So under his guidance, the JSF was created. Later in the next subsequent year, they have fixed the bugs, and you notice this is highlighted over here, JSR 255 and JSR 127. If you listen to any of the webcasts from the Sun Microsystem or the Oracle, they will talk about this JSR. JSR is Java specification requirements. This is the draft that is passed by the Sun Microsystem or the JCP Java community process. Whenever there is a bug or whenever a new modification has to be done to the language, the specification requirement is given to the JCP, that is Java community. Okay. Java community is not just the Sun Microsystem or Oracle. It is chaired by IBM, it is chaired by the Oracle and many others, the Red Hat and many other people. So everybody come together and develop this Java language. It is not, it's not like Microsoft products, wherein only Microsoft is developing it and others have nothing to say about it. When it is Java, everybody has the right to include new or modify the existing code and make it better. How do they do it is, whenever there is a new modification, the modification is given to the community and everybody sit together. If they agree that some things has to be fixed or some new alternatives has to be provided, then they will draft it under a number, and these are usually running numbers. And the JSR 252 was used exclusively for JSF, and there are other 314. Now it is not just JSF, it includes all the Java EE and other improvements. The numbers are given for one particular draft. If you really want to know the details about the JSF 1.2, then you will have to read this draft that was passed, that is JSR 252. The good thing about this was the 1.2 version came up with the Java EE, and the Java EE 5 had the idea of annotation. So slowly people change over from XML to the annotation, and nowadays you know very well people don't use XML for configuring. Instead of that, we use the annotation. The latest one to be released is 2.2. I think now it is 2.2. I think one more .2 is there. Some minor variation that is being provided, and I think you are already familiar with this. You have 4-digit numbers, major, minor, revision, and the draft. The 4. You have already seen this in your software engineering, how the version numbers are provided. 4-digit numbers usually provided. Okay. And today I will not be able to show you this particular website because my machine is going a bit slow. But yesterday I have shown you that if you want to really know about the Java Faces, go to this particular website and you have the details about it. Yesterday I have shown you that particular thing. And yesterday again I have told you that one of the reference implementation that is created by Sun Microsystem itself was Moharan. And if you want to go to this particular site, you just go to javafaces.java.net, or you just search for JSF reference implementation on the Google, you will end up in the site. This is the main reference that was created by Sun Microsystem, but that's not the end of it. If you don't like it, you can go for other reference implementations. One of them is MyFaces, that is by the Apache, and you can see the features. I won't talk about the features, just to tell you that there are additional implementation. The other one that is there is the Oracle ADF, and I have this JDeveloper. I will not be able to show you the JDeveloper because the mission is already slow, and if I start the JDeveloper, it will be terribly slow. Okay, so there is this JDeveloper. If possible, afternoon I will show you what is the advantage of using JDeveloper. In the JDeveloper, you can use the drag drop facility, so you can draw how you have designed this string application by dragging something from the toolbox and placing it. The same kind of development is possible with the JDeveloper. Unfortunately, JDeveloper is not installed on the in your lab, so it is not possible for me to show you any demo on the or hands-on on the JDeveloper in the lab session. The next one is the rich faces. This is from the JBoss, and if you are not familiar about this JBoss is the server, your application server that is created by the Red Hat. All Red Hat come with this JBoss. It is backed by the Red Hat. The next one to come is the shell from again the Apache community that has created. The one that is of good use to you is the ice faces, and there is a direct support for ice faces, rich faces, and prime faces in the NetBeans. You cannot drag and drop, but those libraries are pre-built. You don't have to download anything. The NetBeans come up with the library support directly for ice faces as well as the prime faces. And in the last class, I've shown you how to use the prime faces. Today, I will show you some demo again using copy paste. I will not spend a lot of time. I will take some of the examples from here, and we will just copy paste this thing and see how to build the good looking application in the lab using the NetBeans itself. Let's look at what are the benefits of using JSF. One benefit is it is based on MVC. So the design pattern that is very famous and everybody is using it. So you have the advantage. The next one is it is based on the component, and these components are on top of the servlet. So they get all the benefits of a servlet. The other one is they are standardized. That means any component that you use will behave in a standard way. So you don't have to struggle too much in order to use any component. Every component has some standard interfaces with it. If you want, you can use it. And in fact, you don't have to bother about how the components are written, the Java behind it. What you have to know is which is the proper tag that is used to create that component on your page. That's the only thing that you have to bother. Which is that one word? For example, p.meter gauge or anything. You have to know that. If you know it, the rest is automatically taken care of. The other important advantage of using JSF is it's a separation of the behavior and the presentation. This was not possible in the struts. When we had the struts, we knew very well that we are using a web application. So everything was looking like a web application. We get a request, we do something, and we have to send the response back. Whereas when it comes to the JSF, it is not the thing. You have a button. When somebody clicks on that button, what has to be done? So it's your same Visual Basic kind of application. In Visual Basic, what you did? You put a button, you put a text box, you put a combo box and other thing. And you said if the item is selected from the combo box, I am supposed to do this. The same idea is used here. So if somebody clicks on button or if somebody types something on the text box, what is that I am supposed to do? An event is generated, handle that event. And that's the only thing. So you don't have to bother about the real analogy, that is the real thing, that is a request comes to the server handles it, and you have to go behind the request and other things. What you need to do is, if somebody clicks on it, what is that I am supposed to do? What will happen if somebody clicks? That part is taken care by the framework. So when your website is shown to a user on a remote place on earth, when they click on it, on the server, that click event is generated. How it is generated, that is taken care by the framework. You don't have to bother about it. You have to write the code that is required to handle that click event. So your work is simplified. The next part is the presentation. How this component, how this button is presented to user is separate from how it behaves. So what is the meaning of that? Same component can be presented in different way. For example, you can show the button like the ordinary button that you are already familiar, the rectangular button, or you can show it like a hyperlink. So you can change the way in which the component is shown to the user by changing the way in which it is rendered to the user. So there is a separation. The next one is, I've already told you, it is an event driven model. You have to just bother about handling the event or capturing the event and appropriately handling it. You don't have to bother about the real request and response process. So this is the major advantage, because now if you are using this JSF, you feel that you are writing a Visual Basic code. So if you, for example, if you are using the JDeveloper, it looks like your VB. So you drag a component, you double click on the component, the click event is generated, you write the code there. That's the end of it. So it's as simple as that. Okay. The other benefit of it is the components automatically save the data. So when the user types its username and password, that value is stored with the component. Next time if the same page has to be shown, it will automatically show the value back to the user. You don't have to write any code for that. So if you have selected from the list of cities, if you have selected Mangalore as the city, next time if the same page has to be shown because of some error message or because of something, if you are re-rendering the same page, those values are automatically, or the state is automatically handled by the component. You don't have to write any code for that. Okay. And as you can guess, there are a lot of libraries which are available. Tag libraries are available from the rich faces, from the prime faces, from the ice faces, and so on. You get a lot of libraries. Any libraries you can think of using, which is appropriate for your application, can be used. Also, you get, you've already seen, the JSF is implemented by many companies. The Sun Microsystem itself has done, Oracle has done it, IBM has done it, and everybody has their own framework that is implemented based on the JSF. So whichever you want, you can use it. So if you're not happy with the prime faces, you can go to ice faces. If it is not solving your problem, you can just go to the rich faces. And most of them are open source, so you don't have to pay for any using any of these libraries. So now let's look at what you are supposed to do it if at all somebody asks you to create a application on JSF. Naturally, JSF is based on a web application. You will have to design a web page. So you have to create a web page, and that web page must have some components. How do you add some components? There are tags that are available. Just put the appropriate tags and create the JSF, create this web page that has all the required component. Then you have to go to the configuration files to configure what has to be done. So if somebody clicks on one button, you have to show other page. So which is that other page? If this button is clicked, which is the other page that has to be shown? Some kind of configuration has to be done. And the next one is to handle the click event. You know very well, when you are writing a business application, you have some other classes. For example, if you are writing an application for a student management system, definitely you will end up in creating a student class or a teacher class or maybe management class or any other type of classes. You create an object out of it and you have to manage them. So when a user logs in, when a student logs in, you will create an object of type student and you will populate it with some values. and when the student logs out, you will delete that thing. So you have to have a bean that will manage your entire application, and that is required. You have to write it. This is your business logic. And you may have to use some helper object like event listening. So when a click event happens, somebody has to listen to that click event, and somebody has to call a method within the business object. And for that you require this. And the last one is the web.xml. This is to tell the your web server that if a particular request comes, give that request to the JSF. So how you have done it in the struts. If a request ends with the .do, give it to the struts. Similarly, here also we have, if a request is coming for /faces, give it to the JSF. So that is a configuration information that is required for your application. So let's look at individual pieces of this JSF. Now, when we look at this JSF, there are few important components which are part of JSF. One is set of user component classes. Even though when we write our application, we don't directly use these classes. Instead, we use the tags that will automatically call these classes. But you must be aware of this fact that the tags are associated with the appropriate classes. So when you say meter gauge, when you say text button, or when you say input button or command button or anything, there is a class that will handle that, or that will that is associated with the component. So in the JSF, one of the component or one of the part of the JSF is set of UI components. So it depends on how many UI components are there. All of them will have a standard UI component, and some of them will have the extended version of it. So I would close that again, the browser. For example, you may have a scroll bar. You are familiar. You can scroll it, or you can have a progress bar. In most of the time, in the if you have this selection, you can there is only one pointer that is available, or one point that can be moved. You can have a range. I would have shown that thing because of machine is slow down. I'll show it in the afternoon. That is an extension of it. So you can have a button that will show you only a text, or you can have a button that can change its state. For example, in some web pages you might have seen, when you click on the button, it appears as though that button, that particular button is checked in, pressed in. How you have this kind of switches. You might have seen in some web site, when you click on it, the switch or the image changes. When you click it back, the image, different image is shown. That is an extension of the UI component. The prime faces that I have just shown you are all the extension that they have provided for the standard components which are provided by the reference or which are provided by the specification. So it depends on the number of components, depends on which framework that you are using. Some framework may have a restricted number of components. Other, for example, prime faces, rich faces, and so on, they have a lot of components. So you can use a lot of these components. Even if you are going for ADF, it also has a lot of components. So it depends on the number of components, depends on which implementation you are using. The next one is the rendering model. This component has to be converted into HTML format and shown it to the user. So you may have a button, you may have a fancy looking button, the class that represents this, but if the same Java is given to the browser, it will not be able to show it like a button to the user. So this Java has to be somehow converted into an appropriate HTML format and shown it to the user. And that work is done by the renderer. So the work of the renderer is, it takes the component, renders it, converts it into an HTML format and shows it. Now again, the conversion need not be always HTML. It can be into a different format. So you can convert your component. The other one is handling the event. So event, you are already familiar. Whenever somebody clicks on a button, somebody drags, somebody selects something from the different items, then those event has to be captured, and we have this event listener. The next one is the conversion model. What is this conversion model? You know very well what is typed on a web page is all text. Whether you type your telephone number, whether you type your marks, or whether you type your date of birth, everything is a text. But in your model, you cannot just use the text. It has to be converted into an appropriate data type. If the price of an item is typed as a text, you have to convert it into a double or a float or maybe money or any other format, depending upon which language you are using. And this conversion is meant for that. So you take the text from your HTML page, convert it into an appropriate format. So maybe you convert it to a numerical format, date format, or time format, or a very different format. You may take the name, the course, and the semester of a student and then convert it into a student object on fly. It is possible. Directly, it is not supported JSF because JSF is not meant just for a student object. You will have to write your own converter for that. So if the name, course, and semester is provided, then you have to write your own separate converter, register it with the JSF, and what the JSF will do is whenever this information is provided by the user, automatically it will create a student object for you and it is going to give it to you. The next one is the validation. You are all familiar with it. Whenever a value is typed by the user, usually the user type a wrong value or misleading value, you have to validate to verify that the values that the user has typed are within the range or within the required specification. If not, generate a error message, and that is what is the meaning of saying validate model. So altogether, this is what is there in the JSF. So one question can be asked in the examination: explain the different components of JSF, or explain the main parts of JSF. So JSF has the center part of it is the UI component. So user interface component. It could be button, text box, checkbox, radio button, or anything for that matter. This UI component has to be rendered into a different format. For example, you may have a list box that is presented like a list, one after the other, or it can be presented as a combo box. I hope you are familiar with the drop down box or a combo box. So you are rendering it into a different format, and that is what is the renderer's work. And whatever value that user is typing, that has to be converted. The text value has to be converted into an appropriate model type. That is, for example, the text has to be converted into the string that is typed on a text box has to be converted into number, date, or any other type. For that, we need a converter. The value that is typed, the converted value, you will have to verify whether that is there within the required range or some type of validation. And whenever some event occurs, you will have to handle it using the event handler. Apart from that, there are some components that can have child component inside it. For example, you may have a panel. You are already familiar. This ordinary string panel. Panel can have buttons. Panel can have radio buttons, checkboxes, and other things. It's a container. You are already familiar with the component. Container component. Containers contain other component inside it. So your user component may contain some child component inside it. For example, you may have a table as a UI component that can have a smaller component, that can have a checkbox, that can have a button, that can have a drop-down box, and so on. So you can have child component. Whenever you say that I'm going to handle a event, you must know who generated that event. You may have a lot of components in your page, so you may have many buttons, many checkboxes, and so on. When an event is fired, you must know which component actually fired that event. For this, you may have to have the ID that is associated with the component, so that I will be able to pinpoint to a component and say that, okay, this button generated that event, and I'm supposed to handle a specific thing. So let's look at the different pieces. We'll start with the one thing at a time. So far I was talking about the components, UI component. What is a component? There are many definitions for the component. For us, component is nothing but it's a group of classes. So that is what is a component. So you may have a button there may be 2 or 3 classes that is supporting that button. So you may see a small button, or you may see a small checkbox, or you may see a small menu on your page, but behind the scene there can be 2 or 3 classes that is responsible for showing, or that is responsible for handling that particular component. So it's a group of classes that provide a reusable piece of a web-based user interface code. So it is reusable. What's the meaning of saying it is reusable? The meaning of it is you can extend these classes. You know very well, in Java, the good thing about object-oriented programming is if you're not happy with a class, you can extend the class and you can create an extended version of the class. And you have done a lot of exercise of this type in your previous semester. You took a maybe automobile and you generated a car out of it, and somebody generated a scooter out of it, and so on. So you extended the existing class. Similarly, you have a button, you are not happy with that button. Anytime you can take that existing button UI component and extend and provide some extra functionality, and that is what was provided by the prime faces. I showed you a few example, not too many example, but all the example that you see, all the jigs that you see they are extended version of the base component. That's why they are called as reusable. The reason they are reusable is you can use it in many places, as well as you can extend them and use the extended version of it. Okay. So this component could be anything. Button is a simple component, or a table, which is a composed. It is a component that has many other pieces inside it. When we talk about the component, every component is at least associated with the 3 different pieces. One is the subclass that handles the component. Other one is a renderer class, and the third one is a JSP tag. What is this UI component? The component entire state, the functionality is handled by this class. Why it is subclass is because all the components are derived from a base class. So let's look at the other part, and that is the renderer. You have the Java class for button. How do you show it to the user? How do you render? How do you convert it into an HTML format? That is done by this class. This class is responsible for rendering, converting that Java into the equivalent HTML or equivalent WML or some other format. So you can have number of renderers. The same button can be rendered in different way. It is possible by selecting different renderer. The next part is the JSP. Why do we have this JSP? You are already familiar. We are